Welcome, everyone. Today, we're sitting down with Vincent Barr, founder and CEO of Operator, where he spends his time working on customer acquisition and demand generation, particularly for growth stage startups, using his experience in SEO, CRO, performance marketing, and analytics. That is a lot of terminology, but hopefully we get into it and clear a bunch of that confusion up, for me at least. Welcome.
Just going to kind of wing it and kind of go with questions or agenda that you got.
First things first, your bio says I can talk to you about wilderness backpacking, mixed martial arts, house music, board games, and literature. So just quickly, because I love board games and books, which are your favorites lately?
The book that I've been reading recently that I think I've been most engaged with is the UCB Improv manual. So UCB is the Upright Citizens Brigade. And I just did an 8-week improv course, actually with a coworker, and we had a blast. And I've been reading that book, and it's sort of about the elements of an improv scene, and the focus right now is about something called finding the game, or what's actually funny about a scene or about a premise. And you could apply that to kind of any sketch comedy or any comedy scene, and trying to distill that down into like a headline, like refuting the irrefutable. It's definitely more on the pragmatic side, but I feel like that's been complementing the practice and giving me a deeper understanding of comedy.
Wow. I mean, I as with everything, I'm sure there's like tons of skills that overlap too. Like distilling what makes something work is a super valuable skill in general.
Yeah.
It's like quite a company retreat to do that with your colleague.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like we did that together, and there are so many exercises too that are just a lot of fun. I mean, there's like standard kind of yes and exercises, but a lot of it's very embodied work. But yeah, it's been really cool to do with a coworker, and a nice balance from sometimes what can feel not monotonous, but like it's just a totally different realm and a different area of creativity that you get to explore. And that's been a lot of fun. On the board game side, is that the other one you asked about?
Yeah.
So the game that I played most recently was this collaborative game called Magic Maze. I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it, but you're basically trying to navigate your way out of this maze, and there's a timer running, and you have some moves you can make to buy yourself time, but you can only move in certain directions, and you can't communicate verbally with your partner, and you also can't make mistakes or you lose. So it's sort of a bit of making sure you're committing to moving pieces in the right direction, keeping track of the time, and working together with your partner in a way that's collaborative. And there's this, I think the most fun part of the game is there's this big red piece, and you can sort of stamp it down in front of your partner if you want them to make a move, or there's a move that they're not seeing that you want them to take.
It's a passive aggressive game.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, totally. It can really show you how cooperative or uncooperative you are.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that definitely, those two things are actually a perfect example. It just seems like a really good segue into why you started this company. I mean, both are problem solving, looking at things from a macro view, but then also getting into the nitty gritty of why things do and don't work. What were you doing before you started Operator?
Yeah, so before I started Operator, I would say I was sort of professionally freelancing. Along the way, I just continued contracting with, there were B2C companies, but then there were also a lot of B2B companies, usually in the like software and developer marketing space. And there, the focus was a little bit more on demand generation. So that might be someone's doing research about like a certain type of database or security protocol. We might want to use a mix of like content strategy and SEO to like map to different stages of the customer journey. So I would say I spent a lot of time freelancing in like what would be known among subject matter experts in like SEO, CRO, and performance marketing.
Okay. All right. That's a lot of
Sorry,
fancy
that was
words.
too much jargon. Yeah, like in another way, like helping companies acquire customers or generate demand, and doing that through like ads, website optimization, and analytics would be another way to put it.
Right. And so you were already in this world and also seeing the way a couple different companies went about things. And I guess you saw a space to improve that.
Yeah, I think the reason I started doing that was I really enjoyed the like variety of projects and teams that I got to work with. So there was a lot I enjoyed about B2B marketing, and then there was a lot I enjoyed about B2C marketing. And I really wasn't willing to like let one of them go and focus purely on one area. I really enjoyed trying to kind of maintain the different skill sets and different expertise areas and apply it to a range of companies, which is also like there was a period of time where I wondered if I wanted to get into management consulting for similar reasons. I enjoy like deep engagements in new industries and with new businesses because you get to learn about the new industry, the new business. You also get to experience, for me, how do different teams operate? Like what do great operations look like? What does great teamwork look like?
Mm-hmm.
And with different companies, you get to like kind of accelerate your learning there. So you might work with, I don't know, a dozen companies over the course of the year versus just one.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you're getting a wider range of how to do things. There's not just one right way or one company culture.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. Yeah, and also another thing, like to that point, I guess you saw no need for account managers because your site says claims that you have, quote, no account managers. What is an account manager anyway? Is that a hot take?
Well,
Is this part of your streamlining, your skill of streamlining?
it's probably a hot take in a bunch of agencies and I think larger agencies would be like, you can't scale an agency without account managers. And I think some traditional agencies and account managers would be like, we create tons of value. What are you talking about?
Uh,
And they're probably both right. And there's probably a third truth though, which is lots of clients. So like the companies, the brands that hire agencies and consultants. Internally, I remember like in-house, I would get sort of frustrated when we'd have questions about like, hey, why did we choose to use this strategy? Or why are we setting an attribution to this number of days? Or why did we choose this creative? And it's sort of like, well, Jim's the one who thought that through. So let us see if we can find a time with him in the next week. And then you kind of go through this game of telephone, and there's a lot of latency involved. And really, it's sort of just like if you were, if you went to the mechanic and you asked about something, or you went to the doctor and the doctor's like, well, we're going to need to get back to you. The expert's busy right now. It's sort of like just wanting to remove the middleman so that ideally you have the person who is familiar with the strategy and the execution. And that might be a team of people, but everyone's present and you have a direct relationship to them versus them sort of being behind the scenes. And I understand why you would do that, because usually it's hard to find people that have like the client facing skill and the subject matter expertise. So like the traditional role of an account manager, as I see it, is they're responsible for retaining the client and customer satisfaction. So they will relay the strategy and the updates to the client, but like one of the goals or the KPIs that they're measured against is probably the number of clients that they oversee, the average lifespan or retention of that client, and then like the net promoter score of that client. Like how satisfied are they with the service that they're getting, and how likely would they be to refer your agency to other brands. So an account manager they play an important role, but they also don't usually have the subject matter expertise to answer questions if you have a client who was like a former operator themselves, or they're an individual contributor, if that makes sense.
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and I mean, it's hard to find people with all the skills of any job. So anytime you can try to find overlap where there's skills being leveraged in two different ways, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. I think at larger companies, you just think about, well, how do you specialize and how do you kind of tease apart? It's just easier to find people that, for example, is like a conversion rate optimization manager or a Facebook ads manager or a media buyer. And then another person is more on the account management side. So I think they're easier roles to hire for when you break them apart.
Speaking of hiring, I know we talked a little bit about how COVID affected your hiring, and you had a pretty big shift between hiring freelancers to hiring full time.
Yeah.
Was that facilitated a pretty big change? How did it benefit your company, or what kind of perspective did it change for you?
Yeah, I think so. Like, we've actually always been a team of 1099 contractors we were for years. And I think that was partly because there's a stage where you're still trying to figure out, like, is what I'm doing sustainable? Like, can we sustainably grow through purely referrals? So that was the first question. And then during the pandemic, we sort of did this weatherproofing exercise. So it was like, okay, how do we like ensure that we're all able to do the thing that we're good at and employed through the pandemic? And that's sort of a mix of like lowering operating expenses, and OpEx, and or ensuring that we have great our current relationships with clients are great, and that we can attract any new business that we can, but really just trying to like make sure that we can sustain like a good economic financial profile for the indefinite future. And then later, after the pandemic, I started to think more about like, one, we'd started to gel as a team as far as like sort of the core members. And we also started to be like, hey, let's really invest our time in Operator and build up Operator's brand and our personal brands, and get this thing to be a real strong, like stable, durable business, both from like a product standpoint, like delivering a great work product and outcomes for our clients, which we'd always been really obsessed about and held a high bar for, but also thinking about like, hey, how many leads are we getting a month? How many of those turn into opportunities and deals? How much of this is coming in through me, or like kind of a founder-led sales motion or a key man motion, and trying to make that a bit more distributed. And then we moved to making, designating ourselves as an S Corp instead of an LLC. And we also moved people to W-2s that were like kind of our key team members. And then we still have some fantastic 1099 contractors in our network that we just bring on a project-based basis, because they either have full-time roles or part-time roles, or they're doing their own thing on the side. So that's a little bit about how that's changed. And I don't think it makes the day-to-day really look any differently, but it is a bit of a comfort. Though I would say like when we first made that move, I was nervous for like 2 months, because you have people's livelihoods
Mm.
in your hands or weighing on you. So I remember I started reading books about sales and marketing, and I'm now taking a course on it as well, just to like B2B marketing for professional service firms specifically is a little bit unique. So yeah, that move, I think it makes things feel a bit more real, so to speak. Not that they weren't before, but the responsibility to your team is always there, but even more so, I think, when you make that move.
I mean, yeah, of course, instead of being able to cut back when it's slow, it's more about long-term goals and long-term strength.
Exactly. Yeah, you're totally right.
So let's pivot to the company. So I know you work with a huge wide range of people. There's no need for you to learn about dog food and like maybe the specific kind of clothing that a certain company is making, but how much do you have to get to know these companies, and when should they come to you?
Yeah. So usually what we do is like, on a basic level, we have a pretty thorough onboarding questionnaire to get familiar with a company, its products, its marketing, its pricing, the customer journey, what's been working, what hasn't been working, their quantitative and qualitative goals. We do all that stuff, and we try to get that in writing and get links to any internal assets that are useful, and really just do a deep dive to get acquainted with their business and have an artifact we can refer to. We expect that that company has a close enough conversation and understanding of their industry and customers that they can relay that to us, because we really don't do like focus groups, for example, with their customers. We think that should really be done on the brand side for the most part, unless you're doing certain types of surveys and things like that. That's kind of how we engage. And then usually now we have prior experience in the vertical that we'd be working in with a new client. We have a sense for regulatory challenges. We might have a sense for the buying journey or the life cycle. We might have a sense even for like acquisition benchmarks and what good conversion rates would look like and what good response rates would look like to messaging. So I think you kind of build up that library of knowledge over time so that the number of first impression problems you have actually starts to decline. I think that's one benefit of having worked with a lot of companies and in a range of industries. Yeah, that's kind of how we get started and get to know them. What was your second question?
It was when should they call you?
Yeah, I think there are a few times when a company should call us. The first is if they have ambitious acquisition goals that they don't think they would reach. So like they're trying to hit a certain revenue target or acquire thousands of new customers, or they're preparing for a fundraise and they actually want to get more cost efficient. So we help companies with the growth side of things, but we can also help them with cost efficiency and achieving profitability. So things like if you need to lower your customer acquisition cost, if you need to increase your return on investment or on ad spend, if you need to increase your net margin or net margin ROAS, those are, numbers that people would be trying to move when they hire us. Some people hire us when they join a new company and they're dissatisfied with the current agency, or they feel like the internal team has a lot of great institutional knowledge and motivation, but they might not have maturity in the channels and subjects that they wanted in. So sometimes we'll do a temporary engagement with them. And then occasionally private equity firms or venture capital firms will introduce us to their portfolio companies, either when there's a change in leadership or it feels like there's been some like atrophying on the marketing side and they want to rejuvenate things. And usually it's after product market fit. So ideally you understand who your target customer is, you understand who your ideal customers are. Maybe you have some firmographic information or some demographic information, and you've got a way to like consistently sell to them, and you're trying to increase that velocity or you're trying to find new ways to do that. What's your favorite board game, by the way?
I love all kinds of board games, from party games to strategy, but I think right now it's Wormspan. You collect dragons.
Oh, sweet. That's really cool. There's actually from improv, there's a ton of overlap with D&D. So a lot of many of the people that were in the improv class were D&D players or dungeon masters. And I guess some people seek out improv to like improve their DM skills.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's never really occurred to me how applicable improv is. I mean, I know yes and as a skill, as a life skill, especially when you're coming out, like you're saying, you're always going into new projects and kind of like showing up and deciding what new direction people should go into. It's hard to not just come with this isn't working and this isn't working, you shouldn't be doing this, but to make sure that you're yes anding, that you're saying, well, if you like this part of it, we can do this, or trying to get people to run forward with you is definitely a life skill. So for improv classes with colleagues is not a bad idea. I think you're onto something.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And yeah, and our chemistry was great too. And we've become friends outside of work as well. So I was curious how that would like go and if it would be, I don't know, like uncomfortable or feel
Yeah.
good in some way. But it was great. And then like we did a bunch of scenes together and then like in our showcase scenes together as well, and it felt very natural. So it was fun.
Cool. Well, I think that we covered a lot of ground here. Is there like an example of a company or a strategy that you had to rethink or that was a success that you want to share?
Ooh, let me think. This is going to be a bit of a humble brag, but we'll go with it. Yeah, there was a company. The first one was a friend had introduced me, or a professional contact really had introduced me to a company. They were really fast growing in their category and kind of known as the fastest growing in their category. And he was like, "Hey, I think they would benefit from working with you guys." And I remember I met the VP of marketing. I thought she was super bright. And I recognized the agency they were working with, and they were like at the time sort of the bleeding edge agency in that space. And I'd worked directly with their team when I was in-house, and I thought they were really good. So I was like, guys, I don't think there's anything we can do for you here. And they were like, well, we already gave them notice and we really want to work with you guys and we heard great things. So I'm like, this is going to be a disaster. I was like, it's not only going to like, probably not, maybe it goes neutrally at best, but
Like you just felt you had nothing to offer. Like they were just doing great.
totally. And I'm like, this other company probably has like, they probably got 6 people. Not that the number of people matters. I actually don't think it does at all. I think like good judgment compounds, and like you can get more value out of someone, in my opinion, with 20% better judgment than like 3 people with like 20% worse judgment. I know the math on that's off, but like, but I do think judgment and like good judgment matters a lot.
Sure.
So we, and knowing what not to do. But I was like, they also have a great engineering team. They probably built a lot of automations we wouldn't be able to replicate, and their proprietary technology and all this stuff. So anyway, we go in and we start working with them. I also was afraid of just burning the reputation of my professional contact who had referred us. But before long, we had just done this meticulous exercise and we're like, all right, let's just do this the way we would do any other company in our approach to, this was specifically to paid search. So like they have this category with all kinds of permutations and different types of product, and it's for different types of customers. And there are all these ways that someone could search for it, and there are different types of intent. So we just broke all of that down and created this taxonomy of the space and then rolled it out. And before we knew it, like we had reduced their customer acquisition costs by more than like 25%. And we had doubled the amount of sales they were doing on a monthly basis. And
Wow.
it was really, really cool. And then we started working with the product team on unique landing pages for each of these sort of unique personas, and then building some automations to personalize that based on different consumer search intent. And we had so many wins. It was incredible. And that was really inflating. So that was like one example. And similarly, we started with another company about 1.5 years ago that had gone through like 2 consultants. We actually didn't win our first proposal in another agency. And then they came back to us after all of that and said, hey, can you help? And we said, yeah, but we also kind of expected if that many people didn't succeed here, maybe we won't. And I think we've like 4 to 6x'd their net margin and revenue, which has been awesome. It's very high touch. It's very involved, but we've just found so many areas to work with them on, from like attribution to analytics to testing out different creative partners and different data partners, and then customer acquisition, introducing new channels and promotions and messaging and creative. So it's just been really cool to build that out and then work with them on their product catalog and a bunch of stuff. So that's been another one that I think was like a big success story.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, that speaks to so much, like not just improvising and coming with a new perspective, but also having faith in your skill set. And it takes a leap of faith. Like you don't know you can do it until you can do it. And not just you personally, but like your team, and like that it can happen at all, even outside your company.
Yep.
You just gotta try, I guess, and hopefully get those wins.
Yep, exactly.
Well, that's really awesome. I'm glad we ended on a note of winning.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Nice to that.
It was so nice to talk to you, and thank you so much for doing this. This podcast is just kind of about learning all the different ins and outs and sides of marketing and production and even just small businesses. So this has been really right on the nose.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad we got to connect. I'm grateful you had me on, and thanks for being a great host and conversation partner.
Thank you for listening to The Strick. If you have any thoughts, we'd love to hear them. Comment here, on Instagram, or LinkedIn. This is a podcast from Istrico Productions. We'll see you all in 2 weeks.